Hey everyone, welcome to Shifty's Club. Today I'm going to talk about pretty much a little bit of everything. Um, I'm going to try to make this segment for the trading card game players, and then video game players, you're going to get the very next video. The reason why I'm going to do this for the trading card game players is because we've got a set coming up in a little bit, and I'm going to get to talking about that. But before you start to listen, if you don't have about 45 minutes to an hour to listen to this, I'd put it aside until you do have time, because I'm pretty sure everyone has time, just might not be now, but probably later. So let's get on to it. As we were talking about before, about the next Destinies and how a few cards will impact, we gotta think about most of the changes it'll make to the format, because I think it'll redefine the format, not define the format, basically redefine how we shape our decks, something like that. Now, we'll see a lot less trainer lock because of this, and the reason why trainer lock decks are going to be very slim is, or some people will try it and think they can get away with it, but it's basically, if you're planning on running Trainer Lock or Ross's and you're not using Gothitelle, you ought to just admit that you're not going to win the tournament. I'm pretty much telling you all the truth too. You just got to admit, we're getting EX Pokemon that's set up as basics. These are huge basics that sit right there. All you need is the energy, attack, 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 attack. There's no Trainer Lock that's going to stop that. And I really believe that no one's going to attempt the Voplin combo, because, it's just not that great. And although we will see Magnezone Electric still run around, we'll see some of the Cake and Coke decks. We'll be seeing pretty much a wide variety of those decks that you've seen at City Championships, along with some new decks. The deck that tends to die down a little is going to be decks that are like Curum for Alligator. Is going to die down because of the EX. And seeing how these EXs can literally take out Curum in one shot, they're not going to attempt to hold themselves like that, because EXs will be found in 80% of the decks that we see at the state championships. And not really a fact, but it's more of an opinion, but it's more of opinion that leans toward the true side, because EXs are going to redefine format for us. And along with that, we've got some really great EXs to talk about. First off, let's talk about Mewtwo EX. Mewtwo EX is going to be seen in most decks with Gardevoir. And when I say Gardevoir, I mean, when you have a psychic energy attached to one of your Pokemon, it counts as 2 psychic. So, not too bad there. Which I think is a really great way of basically getting a setup. And when we talk about getting a setup as far as Gardevoir tends to, we need to make sure that Mewtwo gets the first hit, because if you get the first hit, chances are you're going to take the first prize. And without 3 or 4 catchers in the deck, you're obviously going to fall behind, so we all know to put in at least 3 catchers into our Gardevoir decks with Mewtwo EX. Now, how many different variants are there of this? Well, there's always the very popular Gardevoir Mewtwo, straight up. But I prefer Gardevoir Electrode Prime and Mewtwo EX. And the way this works is basically get Electrode out, Energy Might, knock yourself out. Sounds like a drawback, but it's not. I'm going to tell you why. You'll look at the top 7 cards and choose any energy you see there and attach them to your Pokemon any way you like. Discard the other cards. Now with this comes its upsides, such as twins. You could use twins for basically getting any 2 cards you want. You can use Black Belt to do 40 more damage. But in my turn, I'd probably use twins. And the way that you're going to be getting most of your energy out is running a ton of trainers. And it might seem weird, but Trainer Lock's not really going to do anything in this format unless it's Gothitelle, and Gothitelle's already too easy to knock out. So, I mean, we're not really going to be doing too much because Gothitelle's not going to be run with Gardevoir because that's 2 stage 2s, and by the time it gets set up, it'll be knocked out. And it won't be run with Electrode because Gothitelle takes too long to set up itself to take those prizes. So, and you don't have an energy exchange, so there's really not a reason to do it. Mewtwo EX is a basic that you throw down, you can use any time that you want. So, in my opinion, is it worth it to put Electrode? Of course. With all those trainers and cards to go by, it usually makes it a lot more efficient when you're running Gardevoir and Mewtwo EX to have that Electrode Prime in there to make the energy acceleration more absolute. Next off, we're going to talk about Reshiram EX. Reshiram EX is by far the best fire Pokemon I've seen in this format. Why? Well, because it can run with both Emboar and Typhlosion, and you don't discard any energy attached to it. So, while this does help, Emboar is usually the way to go. And more people are going to see Emboar played because of this, and that's going to lead to more Ninetales, which has the better draw, plus you can run stuff with straight draw. Now most people, and I hate to say this, but most people tend to leave Ninetales out of the deck and play more supporter cards, and that's really how they lose most of their matchups because they don't have that draw that they can guarantee themselves during that game. Because you have cards like Energy Retrieval, you've got cards like Fisherman, you need to use them, take full effect of them. Because one, well, Ninetales is the only reason you're discarding anything at any point. So, does it make sense to use Ninetales along with Energy Retrieval and Fisherman and Junk Arms to get the Energy Retrieval back? Of course. Because Ninetales gives you more draw, more consistency, and thus more cards in your hand. Now, does it make sense to play things like Sages inside of a deck that like Emboar or Typhlosion? Really not. I mean, unless you're planning on just discarding a bunch of fire energy, then odds are odds. You might have 5 of the best cards in that 5 card pile right there. You have to choose 2, put the other 3 down. So it's not really too much of a blowback as far as it is deficiency. And when I say that, I say it's better off to run something like Charon in Engineer's Adjustments. Anyone can tell you that I played with that it's a lot easier to use Ninetales in 4 Charon and 4 Engineer in your deck as your supporter line, a few Fishermen, and 4 Pokemon Collector. That's all you need for your support line. And Ninetales, usually 3-3. If you don't feel so sure about that many Ninetales, go 2-2. But do not try a 1-1. It really doesn't work. If you try to do what I did about Claydol, be running 4-4, go right ahead. Same yourself down. It's very consistent, and it helps you get all the cards you need out that fast. So, I mean, y'all probably all remember the Porygon-Z with 4 Claydol deck everyone was talking about 2010 States. And how I did pretty well in that competition with the 4 Claydol, and how I set up so consistently path and go around Spiritomb lock, Trainer Lock, and I could basically set up all my support draw, then get out a Dialga G level X after I, found some blowbacks in Gengar, get Dialga G level X, attach all the trainers, and get rolling. Now, that was good around Trainer Lock, because we don't have anything to get around Trainer Lock like that. We have to use basically snipes or ways to get Voplum off the bench. And because of Shiftry, Voplum makes no play. I'm going to tell you that right now. And that usually gives decks like Emboar with Ninetales or Typhlosion with Ninetales more room to go. And is it better to use Typhlosion or Emboar? I'd say Emboar. Why? Well, because you only need Switch. And the less Embor. And when you need Typhlosion, you don't really need Switch, but you need more Typhlosion. And to get one energy back out of this card pile and put a damage counter on your Pokemon really isn't achieving as much as Embor could. And not to mention, Embor's also got an attack itself in the Bad Bore, or the attack Embor. I don't really like calling it Bad Bore because it's not really that bad. Doing 150 for 2 fire and 2 colorless, and you discard the fire energy attached to it. But the reason I wouldn't use it in this particular deck is because Reshiram EX is probably doing most of your attacking for you. So, without further ado, let's move on to Zekrom EX. Zekrom EX is going to see major play with basically Electric and Thundurus. And the reason why I'm saying this is because unless you want to use Magnezone with Electric and Zekrom EX, usually you're going to use Zekrom EX and Tornadus for this, so you could get more of a emphasized matchup. But because you don't have to put that extra damage counter, and the Electric is stage 1 as opposed to Typhlosion stage 2, it makes more sense to use Sages in decks like this. So if you want to use Magnezone, I prefer to use something like Magnezone with Electric and Zekrom EX. Otherwise, I'd probably use Zekrom EX with Electric and Tornadus. Why is Zekrom regular not needed in this deck? Well, because 120 really isn't achieving anything. When you're hitting for 150, discarding 2 energy attached to Zekrom, you're pretty much doing everything that Zekrom couldn't do before. And because now you got the 120 damage, and you don't really need to be putting those extra damage onto Zekrom. It's really a drawback to put that one Zekrom that's not EX in there, because it's really going to hurt you as far as damage output and basically having the prize swap. Now, is this going to be a good deck? You bet it is. Because of the Electric Swarm we've seen at Cities, everyone wanted to use Magnezone Electric with either Thundurus or Zekrom. We knew that something weird was going to happen. And when I said something like this, we always knew that, hey, you know that Zekrom is probably the best Pokemon out right now. Shaman, Pachirisu, and sometimes Tornadus. Then it moved on to where Electric comes out, and they're going to pair it with Zekrom in Magnezone Prime, or they'll pair Thundurus instead, so they get the extra energy and discards every so often. Then, obviously, you've got this format's deck, which is Zekrom EX, Electric, and probably Magnezone or Thundurus, either way you want to go with that. And that's probably what I'd probably prefer when it comes to that Pokemon. Next up, if it comes out in this set, we've got Kyurem EX. Now, what's so great about Kyurem EX? Not much. And would I recommend you playing it? No. I'd probably recommend you playing the regular Kyurem instead. But unless you're worried about matchups that have water weakness, such as Typhlosion or Embor, I wouldn't really worry about it unless you're playing Electro Prime. Then if you're playing Electro Prime, you could use maybe 1 or 2 water energy and some rainbows and prism energy in order to emphasize these matchups. Now, is it worth the risk putting that Kyurem EX in? Probably. It really depends. What's your matchup that you're playing? Is it a water weakness? If so, yeah. If not, then unless you have to start with it, don't really need to play it. Rather, use Communication or Collector for something else. And just remember that if Kyurem EX gets down your field and gets Catcher, your opponent probably knows that you probably don't know too much about how you're going to excel the energy onto your other Pokemon, plus getting the rhythm going in your deck. So, in other words, probably not. Next up, we have Gardevoir. Gardevoir is probably the most hyped Pokemon coming out. As far as Mewtwo EX goes, it's the most hyped Pokemon as far as attacking. And these two Pokemon are going to probably be seen in a combo, if not Celebi Prime with Mewtwo EX. Now, how great is Gardevoir? Well, it could be run with almost anything that uses psychic type energy, or rainbow energy for that matter. And what I'd say is, usually if you use a rainbow energy, that second energy counts as psychic, not as anything you want it to be. Just remember that. That's a ruling that I got after I heard about Gardevoir coming out. Was that one extra energy has to be psychic, regardless what that other one is. The second one's always psychic. So it really depends. Because that first rainbow counts as one of every energy, but only one energy at a time. Now, if no matter what you make that energy, that second one's gonna be a psychic energy. Um, but so let's not get carried away with that one. But as far as Gardevoir goes, it's practically one of those Pokemon that really seems to catch your eye. It seems to look so good in front of you, but in reality, it really depends, because most players tend to say Pokemon like Executor could benefit from this, Pokemon like Lantern Prime could benefit, and you're probably right. Lantern Prime is probably your best option as far as Gardevoir goes, because if you use Electrode Prime, self-destruct, have Gardevoir on the bench, and have a Lantern Prime, guess what? You're doing literally 130, 150 damage for 4 energy, which is absolutely amazing. And is it totally the best thing in the world? You bet it is. And for that reason, a single effort having these energy onto your Pokemon really does help the flow of the game. Now, are there any other combos that you could use with Gardevoir that don't require energy acceleration? There really are. And one of them you could probably think of right now is Musharna from the Emerging Powers. Now, for one Psychic and the Gardevoir, you could basically say you're doing 90 damage if the opponent's asleep. Now, how would you basically combo that? Well, get a Hypno from Heart Gold Soul Silver. If that doesn't work, go to your next one. Usually one of the two will work, and you could hit them for 90 for 1 energy, which isn't bad, but it's not the best thing in the world. So, now, are there any other real good combos that it works with? Not really. As far as energy acceleration is probably your best bet as far as Gardevoir goes, but in the long term, we'll start seeing Gardevoir start to die down as far as when other sets start coming into play. And the reason for this is because Mewtwo will be at a disadvantage. After I've looked at all the cards that are starting to come out, I tend to get a picture of what's going to be good and what's not. Next up, we got Shiftry, which is the reason why Trainer Lock decks won't have a chance in this format. If Trainer Lock starts to see any real play, most people usually tech in 1 Seed Up, 1 Shiftry, or a 101 line of Shiftry, and just be able to rare candy that bop them away, and pretty much either be able to judge or in it into the deck, so the whole thing will pretty much die down. And not having that one Vileplume will allow you so much room for you to get rid of all your opponent's resources, plus help you set up. So, is it really worth it? Well, you can't really run a 101 line, could you? You'd have to run a 111. Is that worth it? Well, it really depends. Do you know that your opponent's playing an Oddish? If you do, the best way to handle this is to have the seed up down, then rare candy, Shiftry, throw Oddish back in. This prevents the Vileplume from coming out into play, gives you more time, and that's what I mean by getting rid of Vileplume. Get rid of Oddish early. That way, your opponent doesn't have a chance to set up. So if you see an Oddish, it's best to have that seed out down, rare candy, Shiftry. So if you see any sign of an Oddish, don't be afraid to play it down, because if you play down your C dot and you misplay, Super Scoop it or Seeker. Because most decks with Shifter are definitely going to have Super Scoop up or Seeker for that reason. So that's probably a good reason why. Well, the next Pokemon is not really the best, but we've seen its power before, and this is Musharna. The new Musharna for the next Destiny set will have a power, or ability as we call it now, that allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck and choose one of them. And what do you do with the other one? You put it on top of your deck. So, is this really the best card to use? Well, if you combine it with cards like Slow King or Research Records, you could be pulling the one card that you want every single turn. The more Research Records and Slow Kings you play, you could probably be, or the one Slow King and more Research Records, you'd be looking at all these cards, trying to put cards that you don't want on the bottom of your deck, and then be able to choose these cards. Choose the one you want now, draw the other one later, and then next turn choose the one you want now, draw the other one later, stuff like that. And it really does help as far as acceleration goes, but if I were you and you had Research Records and a Slow King, it'd be better just to use a card like Cheren. Next, since we didn't talk about Musharna that much, let's talk about another Pokemon that could be seeing some really good daylight, Zapdos. Now, it hasn't been official whether Zapdos is going to be included in the set or not, but with the Articuno and Moltres out, I'm feeling pretty confident about Zapdos. Now, what does Zapdos do? Well, we're not going to worry about anything other than 2 things. Number 1, it's a fighting resistance and a lightning weakness. Number 2, it is an attack for 2 lightning, 2 colors, so not badly wrong, and you flip 4 coins, does 50 damage times the number of heads. Now, this might sound weird, but that's your counter around your fighting type weakness in Zekrom, Patrice, and Shaman. Gotta admit, but it's a pretty good strategy. All you need is Victini. So, now you gotta ask yourself, is this worth it? Well, it really depends. Is your deck a basic reliant deck? If so, something like Zekrom, Patrice, Shaman, it's definitely worth it. If it's something such as Magnezone, Electric, then you don't really need it, and it's not really necessary because you can always put in Tornadus if you needed. And even while Tornadus isn't really a good option, most people just like to blow through Magnezone Prime's energy burner attacks, or lost burn attacks, so it's not really that efficient, but it definitely does help a lot. And about this upcoming format, we really see that not too many trainer Stadium Supporter cards and energy really have much effect, but I really believe this next card is really going to have a lot of effect on the format, and it's Prism Energy. If you never heard of it, you probably were wondering what I was talking about when I was talking about Cure Me X. Well, Prism Energy, if attached to a basic Pokemon, counts as one of every energy. If it's attached to anything else, it's just a colorless energy. So, how does this make us any good? Well, if you're playing with Electrode Prime and other basics, or as most people call Cake or Coke decks, you're pretty much looking at attaching all this energy that you need to any of your Pokemon in any way you like. And once you have the right basics out, the deck really becomes hard to beat. And with Prism Energy, it's going to make it just that much harder to beat. So, are we really looking at anything that feels like it's not going to work? Really not. And the reason I say that is because Prism Energy is going to define how basics are played in this deck. And overall, Prism Energy is going to define, period, how basic Pokemon are played and how they're teched into decks. Because now, with Prism Energy, you can start putting things that don't even belong. So say you don't have fire or fighting energy in your decks, you could start putting things like Terrakion and Reshiram into your decks just so you can use those attacks that you often wouldn't use. And you could even use other really cool combos, and you can make 6 corners with Electro Prime a pretty efficient deck. Or you could say use any basics that you really feel in particular that are any good. So for that matter, I feel like Prism Energy is going to do really good as far as the basics go in this format, so looking for that. And speaking of basics, we got a stadium card. First one in a real set. Now, I'm not going to say the first one we had black and white because technically Tropical Beach is the first stadium we had in black and white as far as black and white cards go, period, because it did come out in the black and white promo set as a World Championship promo. Now, what's this stadium and how does it work? Well, first off, its name is Sky Narrow Bridge, and what it does is it basically will give you one less retreat cost on each basic Pokemon in play, yours and your opponent's. So, what you do in this situation is use Pokemon such as your basics in your deck. If you're heavily relying on basics, you're probably going to run 2, 3, sometimes even 4 of these if you really feel like it's necessary. Now, if you don't run that much draw support, then I definitely require 4, because it really does not work if you don't have as many and almost no draw support. And in turn for that, you're really looking at other Pokemon that could also benefit from this as well, such as, say, the all-popular combo that we have going on, such as Keck and Coke, obviously, and even if you wanted to call it Tornadus and Electric, you could basically free retreat Thundurus whenever the heck you wanted without wasting that Dynamotor or that free attachment during that turn or an energy already attached. So, realistically, it would work in almost any good basic deck we have right now, and could definitely shape up the format. And I think it's, and along with Prism Energy, you're definitely going to do some damage to the format and give basic Pokemon all the hype in the world. We also got a new supporter that's called Silent. And the only decks that will not use Silent are Electrode Prime variants. And the reason I say this is because in Electrode Prime, you want to keep all the energy in your deck and take all the other cards out, basically. So, with Silent, you're looking at decks like Emboar and Feraligatr doing the most damage with Silent. And some decks using Celebi Prime, even if you thought Celebi Prime was any good in your deck. Celebi Prime could also be a good option for getting those energy out on the field and attached to your Pokemon. Same thing with Sky Narrow Bridge. If it was just the exact same way, you could be doing it that way too. But I pretty much believe that options like this are pretty good, and will definitely vary throughout the format with Silent. And I'm looking forward to seeing whether Silent's going to be as effective in the format as most people believe it will be or not. Now, as far as people believe, I really think that Silent's going to do some damage, but you're definitely going to see more Collector because of the fact that not too many people are going to use Emboar. Most of them are going to rely on stuff like Electrode, which some of them will, some of them won't. And more often than not, if you don't have energy in your hand, you could always have that 1 or 2 Silent in your deck help you out. And if you have Pokegear or if you have a Smurgle, you could also get out of Silent that way too. Or you could just get that free Silent if your opponent had it in their hand, get those 3 energy, then play your regular supporter. So, we got some pretty good options this format. And, oh, wait, we're not done. Plus, if we get it, which I doubt we will, there's always the possibility, so I'll go ahead and talk about it now. We got a card, Pokemon Center. And it's a stadium card, and it reads, once during either player's turn, that player may remove 2 damage counters from one of their Pokemon in play. So I think that's pretty good to be able to remove those 2 damage counters. But the bad thing is you have to remove 2 damage counters from one Pokemon. So say if you had a spread game going on, you probably want to remove one from each, but so, but it's just definitely better than it looks. But I mean, we 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 all pretty much thought that Pokemon Center probably wouldn't do too much, but if you run it just right, Pokemon Center could be really helpful. And the way I say that is something like Donphan Prom would definitely work with Pokemon Center. And the reason I say this is because along with Exoskeleton and a Rocky Helmet and possibly Metagross on the bench, you're looking at a free retreat Donphan with Exoskeleton, Rocky Helmet, plus you're moving 2 damage counters each turn from Pokemon Center. So your opponent's going to have a very hard time trying to knock you out. And what's so special about this? Well, you can always use defenders and stuff to try to stall out time. So really, Donphan Metagross is probably the best deck in format right now, with the exception of my Secret Rogue deck. And if I can get the 12 remaining cards that I'm missing for the deck, then that's what I'll get. But anyway, I pretty much feel like most of these cards probably redefined a few sets we got in the format. And for the most part, we're looking at Cake and Coke dying down just a little, and they're going to be replaced with other better basic Pokemon in the EX. But we'll still see Electro Prime, but it won't be a lot of Kyurem, Cobalion in the decks. It'll be more Pokemon that such as Reshiram EX, Zekrom EX, even Mewtwo EX, shall we have it, Kyurem EX. We'll see all these big heavy EX Pokemon coming in with Electro Prime to try to do some damage. Now, does this really always work? Probably not, but it is probably your best option when it comes to running a basic deck, is to run a lot of EX Pokemon with Electro Prime and possibly jump that 16 energy up to about 20. And why 20? Well, keep your current energy list that you got it, and then switch it out for the types of Pokemon that you have in the deck, and then add 4 Prism energy. Most run 16, which is pretty much a dead set amount, and now with Prism energy coming out, it's going to be 20. So you have that extra room for the extra tech, fire, tech, darkness, basic, something like that. And I really like that strategy overall, and it really does help. Now, is there really anything else in this format that's going to do any damage? Well, not really. I don't really see anything else really taking over in this format, so let's get to what we have and recap everything in this set and basically the format. Well, what all decks do I know of other than my Secret Rogue deck that really work? Well, here's where you want to take notes. First off, we do have Gardevoir with Electro Prime and Mewtwo EX. Really great deck. We have Electro Prime with basics. Preferably, you'd want to have Pokemon such as and this is if it were me, I'd have probably Mewtwo EX. I'd definitely keep the Cobalion just for the attack lock. Terrakion for some pretty good matchups, and quite possibly I'd put in Rotom just for that edge that you get, and the one Shaman to tech in. So whenever you need that Rotom to knock out something on the bench or clear the game for an EX Pokemon, you've got that option right there. And the best thing I know to do with Electro Prime and all the basics is look at all the basics we have in format. Now find all their weaknesses and find basic Pokemon of that type. And that way you'll have to play less energy on those certain Pokemon and then it'd be easier to knock them out. So you have the advantage on the other basic decks, and then you already had the advantage on the evolution decks because you already have that advantage of being basic, and you've already set up your basic ground. You just need to get the Electro Prime, and then Energy Might, get those energy onto your Pokemon. Sounds easy. It pretty much is. And really, in turn, what's easier than using Electro Prime? Being able to get twins off of that. Now, talking about twins, that'll lead us into other decks that rely on twins also. And probably the best deck I know of that'll use combos like this will be Lantern Prime, Electro Prime, and Gardevoir. Why this deck? Well, the reason why is because Electro Prime can discard all those psychic energy onto your Pokemon, or get all this psychic energy on your Pokemon, discard the other cards, but in turn, you could be discarding trainers that you could use in that game to help get Gardevoir up, such as the rare candy, and you can always have any of the 4 junk arm you have in your deck, which I always use 4 junk arm in this deck, so, and I have tried it, this deck does work. It's probably the best option, and the way I use this is basically Energy Might, Psychic Energy, and I have some Rainbow, and I have 2 Lightning and 2 Rainbow, which sounds crazy, I know. And the only reason I have the 2 Rainbow is just in case I can't get either the Lightning up. And I want to have more options for the Psychic Energy count, so if I can only get the Psychic Energy instead of the Lightning, but say I have Sizzle Prime going up against, then I have to have that 1 Lightning Energy. I can't have the Rainbow Energy. So in that turn, I had to think about every matchup and how I can get around those plays. So does it really work though is the question, and the answer is yes. Now, are there any downsides? 2. One of them could hurt you half as bad. The other one really won't hurt you as bad, so it's not really nothing to worry about. The one that'll hurt you about half as bad is Terrakion. Putting Electro Prime in basic decks could definitely hurt Electro Prime in the long run. So, in the meantime, it's best to try to set up early and get the game advantage. But how does Lantern able to beat Terrakion? Well, you have that ability to change into a water type, so that really does help. So, what's the matchup that you really have to be too worried about, but you got to be worried about? Well, I hate to say it, but it's Gothitelle. And the reason I say this is because you have 2 stage 1s and a stage 2. You need as many trainer cards as you can to get set up. Now, why not Vileplume? Well, for many reasons. Number 1, you're running Lightning type energy in the deck, so couldn't Rotom fit into this deck? Well, fit Rotom in the deck, you're looking at attach the Rainbow or Lightning and any Psychics that you need. 2. If you run a Rainbow, you need 2 Psychic energy, and then you could basically put up Rotom, knock out Vileplume on the bench for 120, and there's the prize. So, you're not too worried about Vileplume, but you are worried about that Gothitelle. 1, because your opponent just needs it active, they can play any trainers they need, and they usually play about 3 or 4, 1 on the bench and 1 active and 2 or 3 on the bench for backup. So, that's really your least worry, and it's probably the only one of the second worries that is probably going to take place. So, and when I said before about Scissor Prime, why am I not worried about that? Well, because I've got the Lightning energy. So, we're not too specific on that, but it's a really, really good deck. Now, I was saving this deck so I could talk more about it. Metagross Donphan Prime. Now, are there different variants of running this? There are definitely variants are running this. Now, what are they? Well, pretty much you could use it with Gardevoir if you wanted to and lose the game, which no one wants to do because that's two stage 2 and a stage 1. So let's just leave it at a stage 2 and a stage 1 and no more stages, just basics. And the best way to do this is usually have one fighting energy on a Donphan, and then, as always, attack for 60, have that rocky helmet attached to you, so if your opponent tries to attack you, you can basically do 20 more damage to them, and if you have any defenders, you can stall that much more damage off of Donphan from being done next turn. This can definitely help in the game. You also have, excuse me. You also have other ways of fitting off this damage, which could also help. I think Pokemon Center, if it comes out, would definitely help. And junk arms for all these defender, and if you ever need it back, you can get Rocky Helmet back. But most of the time you'll have a free retreat Donphan, and even with 3 fighting energy, you could free retreat Donphan with the Metagross if you had a psychic energy attached to it, which isn't that bad because even with a psychic energy, and you could have 2 any other energy, free retreat Donphan, retreat to the bench, obviously, and you could throw a Shaman down, move the energy to the other Donphan while you're setting up more energy on that next one, or you could just throw a Max Potion, take the damage off, throw the energy down, and then just keep piling energy. If they decide to catch you up, you always got an option to Seeker Shaman, Shaman again, and then attach those energy, and keep the game going. Now, people watching this video are going to wonder how this works well, and that's why I'm going to try to explain as much as I can now, because by the time I want everyone to have the good information, I want people to have the information about the best decks that there are. And in my opinion, Metagross Donphan is the best deck in format as far as the decks go, with the exception of my Secret Rogue deck. So, and have I tested it? Yeah, of course I have. But most people would say that if it's not metagame, it's not good. But in return, I'd like to challenge that. And the reason I'd say that is because of 2 things. One, Metagross has its own attack, double colorless for 60, or 3 psychic for 40. Oh, and did I mention you get to do this to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon? That's insane. And not only that fact that you can easily set up that turn, so if you got game 3, you've got game 3 right there, because you can easily get that 1 prize card before your opponent can exchange the prize. And if your opponent runs stages, it's going to be a lot harder if they don't have Yamega or their own Donphan, because you can do 60 to them, and you have that exoskeleton to prevent that damage from being done back. And that's why most of the time on game 3 you'll have a 4/4 Donphan line, and you'll have that Donphan come into play, and then that's 120. Then you've got the exoskeleton to prevent you. Say that fighting, attach, no bench Pokemon. So what are you going to do now? In the game, there's absolutely no way your opponent can beat it, unless of course they have their own Donphan, or if they have some unknown way of doing this. And that's why you run 3 to 4 catcher and 4 junk arm. For the reason that you can take up any of your opponent's Pokemon if they're stupid enough to throw more than one down, and you can easily knock it out with Donphan. Now, do you run any way to help Donphan get these knockouts in game 3? Well, you do. And why do I do this? Well, because you need them for other games too. Plus Power is probably one of the best cards I've seen in my life other than Crobat G. Now, does Crobat G really work that well? Well, back when we could use Crobat G in Poke Turn, it was probably the best way to put damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. But because we don't have it anymore, we have to use our resources efficiently. And because we got Junk Arm, we can easily get that off of things such as in turn plus power and replay it back down. But because Junk Arms can't be get back with Junk Arms, we don't have any way to get back Junk Arms, we have to use them efficiently. And when we use our resources, we got to think wisely about how we use them. But we don't really got to think twice. We just got to use them when we need them, and then know that we have those Junk Arms. But the Junk Arms are what we use effectively. And in this deck, you just got to be able to manage your Junk Arms effectively in order to take 6 prizes. Now, is this probably the best deck that I know of? You bet it's the best deck I know of. Now, is there a deck that's second to this? Well, there are decks, and I think the next deck that comes to it or matches really close to it is my Secret Rogue deck. It'll be right there up with it. So, and I can't really give away my information about my Secret Rogue deck, but it's if I can find the cards I need for it, then you bet you'll see me at states with it, and then the next 2 states in a row, people will be using it all over the place. But basically, until that time, we'll just have to see what happens. And whenever next Destinies does come out, people will be overhyping the Mewtwo's and trying to get them way too fast. And most people think just because Guard will come out and Mewtwo's up, we need some way of running this. And I really don't think that Mewtwo EX is too much of a factor as far as the metagame goes, but rather Gardevoir takes its time to set up, and Mewtwo EX is left as a big liability sitting right there. That's 2 prizes that you can easily take with your own Mewtwo EX or some other rogue factor. And I'd probably have to say that the worst part is that you could take 2 energy attached to 1 Mewtwo EX, and you know what that's doing to you right there? Or that's basically knocking out 1 Mewtwo EX. Because, see, you've got 2 Psychic attached to it, right? That's 40. Gardevoir on the bench, that's 80. Times 2 for weakness, 160, plus power, 170. Knockout on another Mewtwo EX. So, whoever gets the first Gardevoir up in the mirror match needs to remember that that 1 plus power is very important. You need that 1 plus power to observe the prize count in the prize matches with Mewtwo EX, because you're going to be taking those first 2 prizes, which is very important. And the thing about Mewtwo EX overall is that no matter what, you just got to make sure that you have a way of getting those energy back into your hand or back onto your field. And really the only way of doing this is if EXP share comes out. The only way I know of is to have one of those attached, but you really want to have an Eviolite attached to Mewtwo in the first place. In that case, you would just need three Psychic Energy attached to Mewtwo. You'd still be able to knock it out with Gardevoir on the bench. I mean, in no way could you prevent that, because that's basically 60 times 2 for Gardevoir is 120, times 2 again is 240, and there's no Mewtwo alive that could stop that kind of attack power. And no matter what you did, there's almost no way with a Gardevoir on your opponent's bench could you stop a Mewtwo from hurting your own Mewtwo, or even hurting your own Psychic type matchup. Now, people have talked about Cofagrigus in these decks. Does Cofagrigus worth it? Absolutely not. Now, people will say over and over that it's worth it, it's worth it. It's not. A 3 retreat cost Pokemon has absolutely no business inside of Mewtwo EX Gardevoir. And why? Well, simply because you need that Skynarrow Bridge to help Mewtwo get the free retreat that it needs. Well, not free retreat, but the 1 retreat cost it needs instead of the 2 retreat cost, and Gardevoir never comes up active, but even if it does, you still have those energy, that 1 energy attached to count as 2, so you discard that 1 energy, flip up Gardevoir, and then bring up Mewtwo EX and attack. It's